scope for ideas to be exchanged. And this is something that actually led to the flowering of Islamic civilization, because you did have that atmosphere where, yes, there's one framework of law, the Sharia is a framework of law, but there's an ability for people to engage and discuss with each other about what should be the specifics, the details of that legislation. So in my view, there is actually, and it's well grounded within the Islamic history, that you have difference of opinion, difference in interpretation, that is acknowledged, because there is that element of understanding the text. So this is something that effectively I would say does answer this question. To briefly touch on another point actually you mentioned earlier that I didn't deal with, was your example of Bosnia when you were 17 years old. Now I'm pretty sure that would be under the communist era in Bosnia, when it was still part of Yugoslavia. So I think when I'm talking about the Islamic framework, I'm not talking about any Muslim anywhere in the Islamic world. You go up to that guy and he's going to sort you out because he's Muslim. He'll take care of you. It's actually, we're talking about a framework for a society. And when I gave my speech, I mentioned not only the values of Islam, I also mentioned about the framework of its law, i.e. that there should be a system in place. And when we look to these countries you've mentioned, whether it be Tunisia, Egypt, wherever, you don't find that Sharia system in place. So naturally, we wouldn't say that those issues and social ills that you mentioned would be blamed on that system. Actually, we would say that those were the attempts to ape Western systems within those regions that have resulted in those problems. So we don't take that as, we don't take the blame for those points, in fact.
Okay, actually, I meant doubt in a far more fundamental way. I meant that you can be a religious believer, but hold intellectually to the possibility that your religious belief is absolutely wrong, that it's not true, that there is genuine religious doubt. And I want to give both a personal and a broad sociological account of what I mean by religious doubt and why it might be more virtuous than unquestioned faith. Two examples, the Second World War and the Korean War. Korean War, a lot of Allied prisoners were captured by the communists, and this is the period from which we got the term brainwashing, brainwashed. And it's interesting to note that the people who cracked, the people who could be persuaded to go out and mouth crude communist propaganda, were the people who had fundamental and absolute beliefs. Because faced with an overwhelming power, their belief collapsed. The people who survived were the people whose beliefs were very tentative, dubious, didn't really know what to believe. Same was true of the Second World War. The people who, certainly throughout Germany, who showed most resistance to Nazism were agnostic Lutherans. The people who most easily capitulated, because an authority structure kind of programs you to accept the absolute, the powerful, were the Roman Catholics. The personal example is simply, I have lived with the same lady for 39 years now, and she is a devout Roman Catholic, and I'm jolly well not. And I remember listening to a program, we were driving across Tennessee, Bible Belt, and the guy on the radio, there are only two kinds of radio there, country music and evangelical Christianity. And this was one of the latter. And the guy, they're having a serious debate about, can a person with faith live with a person who has no faith? And they all said no. And we both screamed, yes, of course you can. Personal relationship is far deeper than what happens to be your belief about a philosophical or theological proposition. And that would be absolutely fundamental to me, that doctrine is not ultimately very important. The person who's written very well about this, the novelist Andrew Wilson, uses the term wishy-washy. Wishy-washy religion. Religion that doesn't say this is definitely, certainly true. You cannot deny this, you must accept this. Wishy-washy religion is the religion that has true virtue.
Is that a question? Or?
No, that was a response. Do I have to ask another question?
If you like, or
you can leave it if you like.
Yeah, that's fine, that's fine. I guess, see you're getting a bit agitated. It's a bit you've all been waiting for, question and answer section. probably be about 45 minutes long. So if you'd like to raise your hands and state clearly who your question is to and what the question is. And just briefly, we've got 2 speakers here today, not 100 speakers. So try and keep your comments short and sweet. Okay, gentlemen.
If I can make a comment. You can disagree.
You want to speak up as much as you can.
You can disagree that the laws, the Shari'a law, is from a higher being, from a God. But it doesn't mean that you can't appreciate the fact that the laws, the Shari'a laws, will govern a society and produce harmonious, stable society. So, and also to say that you can that man is not in a position to judge right or wrong is a relevant, statement, and just say that man has to judge right and wrong. Obviously, in a society with if a society believes that the laws are not from God because there is no God, he has to, the man has to judge right and wrong. But it doesn't mean that you can't appreciate that the man has got its weaknesses and is limited in terms of its understanding of the consequences of such a law. I think you have to appreciate the fact that man has its weaknesses, and that maybe the Shari'a law, it does in fact bring the harmonious and stable society.
Which harmonious and stable society had you got in mind?
Sorry?
Which harmonious and stable society did you have in mind?
Where everyone lives in a society.
Has it ever happened?
Yeah, it has happened, isn't it?
When?
When Islam was being implemented in history.
Not. I mean, I've read my Bernard Lewis history. Seemed to be all wars to me, but
Well, it depends where you get your references from, isn't it?
didn't last very long.
I just wanted. I was about to make another add to this. Is that you had Jewish Christians living in the Islamic State, and they didn't agree that the Sharia law was from Allah and that it was from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But they still lived in that society, and in fact they encouraged more after the Inquisition. The Jews living in the Islamic State as citizens encouraged the Jews that were persecuted in the Inquisition to come along and live in the society.
Yeah, I mean, I've accepted that, but I think you also have to accept that in the British Empire, for example, Islamic law applied to Muslims within the British Indian Empire. I mean, a very subtle system of law that actually kept a lot of people happy for quite a long time.
Yeah, but those were the personal laws.
No,
Yeah.
just relax for a minute. Gentleman there? Yep.
A question for Mr. Allison. If I understand you correctly, you said that there is no such thing as absolute right and wrong, but my understanding is that is an absolutist metaphysical statement, and actually is a contradiction. Do you see my point?
No, I don't.
Okay, let me rephrase it. To say that there is no such thing as absolute right and wrong is a statement about absolute reality, which is a metaphysical truth, and you've undermined yourself. It's actually a joke. But,
Don't see it follows at all. I don't see any logic in your statement.
Okay. You do philosophy, and you understand this is actually a philosophical contradiction. You can't make an absolutist statement. There's no such thing as absolute truth without making a self-contradiction.
I didn't say there was. I didn't say deny there was absolute truth.
I thought you did.
I said I denied absolute right and wrong.
Okay.
That is to say, ethical right and wrong.
Right. I thought you also denied metaphysical truth. You said that.
No.
Rights and so
I
on.
was talking about
You believe in
ethics.
absolute truth.
No, I was talking about ethics.
Okay. So you do believe in absolute truth then?
Of course, there are some. I mean, Kant. Sorry, how philosophical am I allowed to be?
I think this is the place.
Okay, this is the place. No, I accept, for example, Kant's famous argument about the synthetic a priori. It would count. I mean, I don't know what the force of the word absolutely is and why you wish to use it, because I didn't use it. But it would be absolutely true, I suppose, if you could find what modern interpretations of Kant call a precondition of discourse, and I think you can. In other words, you've got to believe in a science, that is to say, the universe is not entirely random. There are regularities which we can discover. That, because that's a precondition of discourse, you have to assume it in order to be rational. In your terms, it's absolutely true, and I never denied the possibility of that at all. I never even mentioned it.
I think it's quixotic to suggest that there is no absolute moral right and wrong, and at the same time to affirm absolute truth in other areas. It's inconsistent.
Well, it's quixotic along the lines of 98% of modern Western philosophy, then, in that case.
logically it still obtains.
I don't see your logic at all.
Just to interject though, but I would like to kind of clarify, before you said that the Philosophy Society should absolutely reject my position that man cannot decide what's right and wrong. Now, surely you're saying that position should not be accepted at all.
Yeah,
that is an actual verifiable fact that there is absolute right and wrong. However, at the same time, you've rejected the basis that most people, or let's not say most, let's say some people have accepted for what is right and wrong, which is natural law or natural rights.
Yep.
So you've said that there's one basis that you accept for right and wrong, and it's completely opposed to another person's basis for what's right and what's wrong. So surely that means there's some things you will see that this is a correct action, it's right, and they would see it as wrong, and both of you will be talking about the same thing, and you'll both say, I'm being completely rational about that subject. So doesn't that show, so wouldn't it be correct to conclude from that there isn't actually some absolute clear right and wrong in the issue you're judging? If, for example, someone's eating an apple and he can't taste the apple, we'll presume maybe there's something that's affected his taste buds, maybe he's got a cold. He can't sense the sweetness of the apple or its taste. So in this issue, we can say human beings can judge, what's sweet, what's sour, what's bitter, and so on. The human mind can make a judgment on this issue. When we look at actions that people do and the consequences of the action, actually weighing what's right and wrong, what's good and bad in the action, there isn't some similar element that you can actually perceive by the senses and conclude from that this is good or bad. So that would indicate that man independently does not verify what's right and wrong. He may have bases upon which he believes he's verifying what's right and wrong, but intellectually we can clearly see that man does not actually judge right and wrong. Because if that were the case, you wouldn't have two bases which completely contradict each other,
funny you should
judging what's right and wrong.
Comparing it to taste, because the famous Latin expression about taste is de gustibus non disputandum, meaning you can't argue about taste, it's purely subjective, and the French equivalent is chacun en son goût, each one to his taste. So I think you've almost put the ball solidly into the back of your own net.
I think you missed the point there actually, because because there's a difference between saying that something tastes bitter, something tastes salty, something like Marmite, for example. You either love it or you hate it, as the advert says. So you can make a claim about whether you like or dislike the taste, but to say it's very salty, most people will argue, it's very salty, I hate it. It's very salty, I like it. But the actual reality of the issue at hand, both of them agree on that. They agree on the phenomenon, but their actual view of whether their preference will be based on what food they're used to or so on, other issues. So again, with actions, there isn't something within actions or interaction in society